This Three Beards Media podcast may contain mature themes, and if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for you. Like the podcast. Nailed it!
Would you like to sample some of my nuts? Hello and welcome back yet again to another edition of Old Man Strength, a podcast of Three Beards Media and brought to you by Relvaton Distilling Company. I am Tim Johnson, joined as always by Chris Shipley. Chris, how are we doing this evening?
I'm doing very well. How are you tonight?
I'm good. I had a very long day at work. It's been very hectic in my schedule lately, but I'm really excited to carve out some time for tonight.
Me too. Yeah, this is one of my bucket list guests that we have tonight. He was the coach at Iowa State. We're just gonna get right into it because nobody's tuning in to listen to us. So
Absolutely.
He was the coach at Iowa State when I was a freshman and went up there. We've had a couple of his former players on. Just recently, we had Blaze Bryant on. But we are so honored to have Coach Jim Walden on the podcast. Coach, thank you for joining Old Man Strength tonight.
Well, it's my pleasure. Just glad to be here chatting with you guys and hope it all comes out all right.
It certainly does. I mean, you've got more hair than Blaze does now.
Well, I still keep a little. I probably could use a haircut, which I'll probably get tomorrow. But I still got a little bit up there anyway.
And we only bring that up because Blaze was pretty proud of his high school and college hairdo. So that's the only reason we bring that up. So.
No, Coach, we're very excited to have you here. You know, Chris and I have had debates with some of the younger generation who think that you know, Iowa State sports began with Fred Hoiberg and Matt Campbell, and not to denigrate what those guys have done, obviously, for Iowa State sports, and we'll get into that in a bit. But you know, for guys like Chris and I, we really think about the foundation that someone, you know, like you and yourself with, you know, Johnny Orr at the same time as well, what you guys really did to lay a foundation for, I think, what Iowa State sports are today.
Well, I remember I'm old enough to know that Iowa State had quality programs under Earl Bruce and Johnny Majors. And a lot of people, unless you're probably 70 years or more, you don't know that. Johnny Orr, for instance, was a quality basketball coach. Started way back when. But when you look at football, you go all the way back to the 70s, the early 70s. Johnny Majors beat us at when I was at Nebraska in 1972. We tied the game, but he won the game. I mean, the only reason we didn't win, I say we, I'm talking Iowa State, because they missed an extra point with like no time left on the clock, and we ended up in I don't know what it was, 20-20 maybe. But all I know is that John Majors that year had a tremendous season. Then Earl came along later and did the same thing. Yeah, there's been some gaps in between, and I didn't feel one. We just didn't have what it took, and I'm not ashamed of that. We busted our butt. But Dan McCarney, for instance, did a wonderful job. So in and out, Iowa State athletics has been in pretty good hands. Tim Floyd, John Majors. I mean, come on now. It's just they've been some really quality coaches go through that program.
Yeah, we had the privilege of having Coach McCarney on Old Man Strength as well, and I think he gave a lot of credit to yourself as well for, I think, what it means to try to establish a program at Iowa State.
Well, I think it's let's give Jamie Pollard some pats here and some love. The first thing you've got to do in any situation in today's world is keep up with the Joneses. It took Iowa State a long time, football wise, to understand that. They thought when they built a new stadium way back in the early 70s and then threw up an Olsen building that was ahead of the curve. Well, I happened to have been at Nebraska during the 69, 71, and 2, and our worst facilities were better than the at that time. And they've gotten bigger too. But Jamie has brought Iowa State facilities. And I try to say this in the nicest way. Athletic directors and people sponsors are like a stagecoach. I used to say all the time, a stagecoach doesn't run unless you've got good horses. So that's the people that pay the bills. That the horses that's the fans. But if you don't have somebody driving that stage, horses don't run. Mm-hmm. And so if you just look at it on a practical extent, they pull the wagon, but you need an AD to tell them what they're doing, how to do it, what's the best way to do it. And I give Jamie 100% of the credit. Max Schurig had a willing heart. He just didn't have the budget. And then there's been some different ones there. But Jamie has done a marvelous job of keeping and getting Iowa State athletics on a page where it's second to none. They're not getting killed out in the recruiting trail because of lack of facilities.
No, for sure. When we interviewed a few of your previous players, and when we talked about the foundation that you gave, George Condit, for example, talked quite a bit about how he'd go to war with you and your guys any day of the week. He wouldn't have traded those guys for anybody.
Well, strange as it may seem, I wrote down some guys here: Mike Bush, Brett Oberg, Keith Sims, Joe Henderson, Blaze Bryant, Marcus Robinson, Gene Williams, Marvin Seiler, Chris Peterson, Malcolm Goodwin. These are all guys that gave their heart and soul during a time when I think they knew it and we all knew it, that our chances of being very successful the way you want to be successful was slim and none. Sure. We didn't have the numbers. We had, I think, the most football players I ever had on scholarship at Iowa State was 74 guys, and that was my last year there. And you say, well, why is that? Well, you're both smart enough to know that if you start with 57, you can only bring in 30. Then you have 7 quit, and you graduate 15. So in essence, you start with 57. You're only going to do +5 every year, +8. And so you just can't get it built. Now, they did pass a rule that really helped us, and I'll get into that in a minute, that you could bring a walk-on who had been in your program for 2 years. You could add him to the total, and it didn't take away from the initial. And so that really helped. So we could get our numbers up and try to keep some of these guys that were walk-ons, even though they were like not 1-stars. They were just guys that wanted to be out there. We called them our 12th man, but they were our 12th man, with the exception of Shudak, who was our kicker. We would run 10 guys down on a kickoff team, and not a one of them on scholarship. We said we got a 12th man, but Texas A&M has 1. We had, in theory, we could say we had 12, yeah. But in a sense, it's been built from that. Dan, I thought, came in and really stabilized things enormously. I think he was there 12 or 13 years. I think he just brought it to a point where, and Jamie did some things for him to get it to a certain point. And then it's just with Matt now, it's just, to me, I just think it's very solid.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Earl Bruce and Johnny Majors before there, but there are a couple of coaches in between those guys and you that probably didn't do the program any favors. No. I think that was probably, to put it kindly, something that probably had you kind of strung up a little bit, not able to. You had a few things to overcome. Is that the most diplomatic way I can put that?
Well, yeah, and you say, well, how did it get into that mess? Well, I won't go in. I'll just say Jim. That's enough, as I say. What happened with him is that he got put on probation. Was bending the rules just a little bit, so he passed that on to me as last year, so we could only recruit 10 guys. That was the first punishment. And then, unbeknownst to us in the program, after we got there, Jim had an enormous senior class and a good bunch of guys. They were a great group. I'd love to have had them one more. When I saw how good some of those guys were the year before I came, when did I come? The 86 season, they had a marvelous group of seniors. And I always coveted the fact that I wish I could have held on those guys. Wish we'd had a COVID year back then.
Right.
I could have brought them all forward. But he had 26 seniors. We lost 9 guys between him and me in terms of just a transition. So now you've lost 35 guys from one calendar year, and I could only recruit 10. So that's how it got into that mess.
So speaking of that, and we won't get into specifics with Jim, but another Jim is in the news right now with Jim Harbaugh and the rules that he has allegedly broke and so on. And it dives into a question that I have for you. You, unfortunately, were hamstrung with Jim's violations, and that affected your team and so on. There's rumors here that Harbaugh may not allow their team to play in the playoff or whatever. And I guess I just want to get your thoughts on, he's made these decisions, but the kids are the ones that are going to suffer.
Well, that's always been the biggest bone of contention to me, is that how to punish the guy that did it and not the players who play for it. And up until now, the NC2A was never able to figure that out. They always wanted to punish, and then worse yet, they would find out 2 years later that they had done this, and then they punishing guys that didn't even know the coach. And so notoriously, the NC2A has been inept most of their time there, and that never changes. Knowing how they do things, if Jim Harbaugh is proven that he did in fact do that, they should set him down for the rest of the year, fine him $1 million, and let whoever's left and let the players play on. Because not a single one of those players held a camera in the stands. They didn't do anything that has anything to do with whatever they find out he was doing illegally. So punish the guys that did, but let those guys play. And if there's some assistant coaches, which I know darn well that none of them had anything to do with it, did they maybe know about it? Yeah. Did they utilize it? Maybe, yeah. But you can't take everything away. They're all it. And if they hadn't have done it, would the assistant coaches gone right on doing what they do? Yes. So as an assistant coach, you do what you are told to do.
So Chris kind of mentioned there that, George Condit, Blaze Bryant, they've mentioned how much of kind of a player's coach that you were, how much you cared about your players. And I think that certainly showed. I mean, you obviously, Blaze, Mike Bush were all Americans. Certainly, you were able to get some amazing talent through there. Again, maybe didn't translate into that success. But what do you think was kind of your philosophy with those guys when you were coaching?
Well, be honest. You can be as honest in the world. You just don't ever give a thought to treating anyone different than the rest. And yet, at the same breath, they're all different. So you do have to treat them all differently. But when it came to team concepts, we're all in this thing together. So let's all be treated together the same way. And so that's kind of how it was not. Everybody says, what was your discipline? I said, I didn't have any. My dress code was, if I didn't like the way somebody was dressing at a certain time, and if his hair looked like crap, I'd call him in and I'd say, you don't have to cut it, but I just want you to know you look like,
You can cuss on here, Coach.
and on trips, you had two choices. You could wear a turtleneck or a tie. It was as simple as that. And so I had very few rules. And then I just tried to deal with things as they came per individual person. And I think that worked. Then my biggest fear all the time, my 31 years as coaching, was that any of my players that I was coaching, even that as assistant, would think that I'm favoring one over the other by the way that I've let someone off or not done the same thing to you that I did to him, blah, blah, blah. And so I just love my guys. I just liked them. I appreciated the pain that they went through. I know they had to put up with me screaming at them sometimes, but I also tried to tell a joke and have a night, and be good. See another side of me also, that it wasn't all just pain. And I loved them, and I told them constantly how much I appreciated the effort they gave. We had some tough losses. One was at the University of Minnesota. We had the ball first and goal at the one with a chance to win the ball game. And 4 plays later, we haven't scored. That broke my heart because we lost the game. The second one was we drove the length of the field. Barry Alvarez's first year at Wisconsin, we drove the length of the field, got it down to the 12-yard line, and Shudak missed about a snapshot field goal, which we'd have won the game. We ended up losing 7-6. But when you get in the dressing room after games like that, you try to tell the kids how proud you are of them. And that's what I tried to do. And I was prouder of my guys for the effort they gave during those years, guys, than I was ever mad at them. I just felt we got those kids that stayed with us for those 8 years. It was fun to coach them.
Well, I will say the gentleman that helped me set this up, Keith Schrag, talks about you and gives you your praises all the time to me. I met him on Twitter, and we've kind of become friends. And then we just had Keith Sims on another podcast on Monday, and he talked about how when you took over, that's what got him into the NFL was your offensive philosophy, and it really blossomed him to be able to become the player that he was and was able to go into the NFL. So,
I appreciate that.
Players.
Well, he and Big Smith, we had one side of the line covered. I can tell you that. Right. The one thing I knew I had when I got there was Gene Williams and Sims, and I tried my best, and so did our line coach. We don't want to screw up with that pair. Let's leave that pair alone, and we'll just move over here and try to do the best we can. But they were 2 solid guys, and I tell you a funny story. I heard this later after we'd been coaching. The 2 of them were so confident in how they blocked. And my quarterbacks, I think Peterson told me this, says, Coach, you'd come to the line of scrimmage and you'd hear Sims say to Williams, you going to block him or you want me to? And Williams would go, no, I think you're supposed to block him on this play. And this Peterson say you'd kind of hesitate before you started the starting count because you'd hear them chatting. And he said it was sometimes it'd be a pass pattern. They're both going to drop back in their shells. But it was a hoot listening to him try to talk some D lineman. It's like, well, you want him or you want me to take him? And they, that's how confident they were. They were a pair of really good football players.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely had, maybe not all the pieces all at the exact same time, but over your career at Iowa State, you did have quite a bit of talent that came and played for you. What was it? I mean, obviously, it's a very different game between, the transfer market and recruiting's very different. What are your observations between then and now on bringing talent into a school like Iowa State?
Well, number one, they have more to sell. They have a quality program now. They're coming every year now. Matt Campbell goes out and says, we're winning games. Now, I know we had losing season last year, but look at the whole picture, okay? And look at where they are today and his reputation of finding and coaching quality kids. All right, so that's your background when you go out. Secondly, there's a ton more football players out there than there used to be. And with television and with A&I, everything they got going anymore, you get to look at so many more guys. and the staffs are bigger. So you got more guys looking at more guys all the time. You got 4 coaches in the building constantly looking at recruits. And then they bring the coaches in and say, here, D-line coach, you look at these 2 guys. We found him today. He's over in Toledo, or he's down here in Miami. And so your choices are so much greater. And so I think that's what's helping Iowa State and a lot of schools. You and I both know Ohio State's going to come to town and get what they get, and But the key to success is when you get to that 3rd level. In other words, Ohio State's come, Oklahoma's come. Now maybe Iowa is in there somewhere at that 2nd level that you're going to compete with them. But you want to work really hard at Iowa State, and I know Matt does, beating the 2nd level and the 3rd level guys. You want to be in that pocket of the best 3-star you can find, the motivated 3-star, the 4-star guy that likes you, that wants to come to your place, and he's truly already a good prospect. Those are the guys that Iowa State can get, and that's what's helping their program.
Coach, I was doing some looking. My memory's not as great from a long time ago, but so I was doing some looking up specifically about the Oklahoma game in '90 when you went down there and won that game. And I have a couple questions. Number one, I believe Jeff Shudak was suspended for that game. Is that correct? And that's maybe the reason why you went for 2 so much. And then the other question I have is I'm reading an article that says that you were really sick weekend too.
He was true? Suspended. Jeff was suspended for the week before, the year before. You're right what you're saying.
Okay.
But Jeff kept kicking kickoffs into we had a running back coach, and he warmed up his guys over in the corner of the end zone. And Jeff kept practicing kickoffs after the special teams was supposed to be over. And the special teams coach has had his guys down there, and Jeff was kicking balls into him, and it was furious. So after he went through all that, so I punished Jeff by saying you can't kick. Now I'm going to tell you something that I would never have told anybody, but I'm getting too old to worry about it. But
that's what we want to hear, Coach.
The game I told him he couldn't kick was the very next game. I said, I'm going to suspend you 1 game. Then I realized the next week it was Oklahoma. So I said, well, hell, we're not going to beat them anyway. So that's a good – we probably – the natural thought is we're not going to do that much. Well, if you want to know the truth, we probably need – if we'd had Jeff Shudak, we probably would have won because we had an onside kick. I think the kicker that took his place, Shank, won. We ended up about the 40-yard line. There were several things that happened in the kicking game that had something to do with the fact that Jeff wasn't there. And I always thought, why did I I'll never do that again. I'll tell the coach, move your drill next time instead of punishing my kicker. Then the year later at Oklahoma, and then we got beat 43-42, I think, that day. So any little break in the kicking game, we could have been all right. But nonetheless, it happened.
I think that is the game I remember because I think I remember thinking, man, if we would have had Jeff Shudak, maybe we would have won that game.
Yeah, you say that now, you probably sent me a bad note.
No.
Chris and I have a friend, Bill, that kicked at Drake around that same time, who was a big Jeff Shudak fan, but I'm sure he'd very much appreciate hearing how important it was for a kicker to be in the game and how meaningful it was for them to be in the game.
Well, I guarantee you one thing: we'd had it do over again. I'd have told the running back coach, "Hey, I'll punish him as soon as the season's over. He'll have to run laps or something." but the next year when we did beat Oklahoma down there, I got on the bus as sick as I've ever been that Friday afternoon. I almost canceled, and I didn't know how. I think if I could have figured out a way, I would have said, I'll fly down tomorrow or something. But I said, so anyway, my wife drove me to the bus. She parked the car. We got on the bus, and I didn't say a word to anybody. I got in that front seat, and I just sit there, put a rag over my head, and all the kids knew something was wrong. And then, like I say, I speeded up. I got to the ball game, and I got to the motel, spent the night, never came out of the room, got up about 5:36 the next morning. and walked around, felt a little better, got some fresh air, and then went to the ball game, and the rest was history. We just we fell behind 14-0, and then the kids caught fire. Chris Peterson had a marvelous day. I think he probably rushed for over 100 yards on the quarterback draw. It became our only play. And Marvin Siler had he threw a fake punt, a pass. I think that's probably the only pass we ever let him throw. But he was our up back on the punt team, and they gave us an uncovered look that we always said, if they give us this, Marvin, check it. Well, he did, and he hit Moore for about a 25-yard gain, and then we went in. Long story short, we won the game, and it was a tremendous effort for our guys.
So I mean, you mentioned quarterback draw, getting a lot of rushing yards of the quarterback. The game has changed quite a bit, where you are looking more at mobile quarterbacks. Certainly, the days of a ground and pound and I formation, those types of things are long gone. What do you think is the biggest change in the style of play or the pace of the game or things like that since your time coaching?
Well, it's evolved into, it's gone from, we moved into the passing thing. And if you'll go through that segment of about 10 years, we didn't want everybody's throwing the ball. We're all out of the eye. We're out of the wishbone. We're going receivers, and now we want drop back passers. Mm-hmm. And most of those guys couldn't walk and chew double bubble. They just were great throwers. And so you had a passer. So you go back to, let's say, the 90s. Mm-hmm. For instance, the NFL was full of quarterbacks that couldn't run a lick. Sure. I mean, they either passed or they were Tom Brady's. Yep. Tom Brady is way ahead of his time. He was a guy that lived. He couldn't run a lick, but he proved you could do what he did. The NFL, and then so all that was coming through the college ranks. Well, as that evolved, now all of a sudden we're into a phase now where, we're still running the open offense, but guess who's running the ball more now? And so we've gone. What's the new thing? The new thing is running quarterback draws, quarterback read, the read play, come down, fake, pull it. Well, that's nothing but some of the old wishbone theories. I mean, that's our option play. We used to run that when I was at Washington State. It was what we called the dive option, out of the wing T and out of the split backs. So running quarterbacks are making a recovery to help offset the fact that every team you see now, and I don't think this is good for college football. I don't think it's good for football in general. And I want to say this right now. I want to say this. That I don't like seeing every blooming team I watch run exactly the same offense. 3 wides and 1, 2 wides and 1, motion, 3 and 1, 1 and over. And I'm like, wow. And then I go see my grandson. Now, I'm going to brag a little bit here. There's a school in Seattle named Bellevue. And you know what they run, guys? The wing T. My grandson is in his 3rd year starting there. I think they've lost maybe 4 games in 3 years because nobody on defense sees the offense all year. Now they show up and they got 3 days to get ready for a fullback diving right, halfback diving left, and the wingback coming around, and you don't know which one of them's got the ball. And before you figure it out, the fullback's 36 yards downfield between the hash marks. I mean, running through the goalpost. So my point being, I'm just sick of standard stuff. I want to know, where's the 70s and 80s and early 90s when you, as a defensive coach, when you got the film on Sunday and you're about to get ready to play Nebraska, you're going, oh, my God, that's the best I formation I've ever. Look at that fullback. He will knock you into the next county. Then all of a sudden you're going to Oklahoma. Oh, God, they're running the wishbone. So you had wishbone, you had I formation, you had the Houston veer, and you had the wing T. They've all gone dead because now all we do is so we've gone through our pass phase with the quarterback standing there like a statue, throwing 45 passes a game. We've now have no use for running backs, but yet everybody that's got a good one wins. And so we're stuck in that. So I don't want to badmouth it that much, but it's boring to me, if you don't know the truth. After what I've been through my 31 years of coaching, I just think it's boring.
Well, no, go ahead, Chris.
Tim. I got to show, this popped up on a memory yesterday, so I grabbed it because this totally shows what you're talking about, Coach. I'm sure you remember this play. Let's see if you remember this play.
They'll line up in the wishbone formation this time. Spencer split to the left side. Here's Utter. And it is a Boomerowski play with Thompson. Touchdown! It's the Fumble-Rowski play with Thompson.
I was like, I saw that yesterday, and I was I gotta.
That's what you do, guys. When you don't have a good running back, you use your guards to carry the ball. The old Bummerooski, we put it in, and Jimmy read it perfectly, and it was a lot of fun. But those are the days when you try to do something that makes everybody have a laugh or a little bit.
Yeah, well, you mentioned a position that's basically all but dead in a fullback. I mean, that's not even. It's not even a thing anymore in any of these systems. But you did also, I mean, you had your fair share of pretty good running backs as well through the years.
Well, we did. Blaze was a good running back. Joe Henderson was a good running back. And we had to always find us a fullback in some ways to balance that. But you've got to use them some. The best example I could give as far as the best I formations you saw in those days were Nebraska. We all know how good they were.
Yep.
And they had so many great fullbacks and running backs in featuring play action passes, 2 tight ends or wing. Then they'd go to a slot. And they were as boring as it looked from the stands. As a defensive coach, it was unbelievably complex to stop because you had to keep your guys on the line of scrimmage. And when they snapped that ball and that quarterback rolled back and handed that ball to that eye back, you better have some people in position because that fullback was going to knock your brains out. And they're going to double down on your 5 technique, kick the end out with a pulling guard, and that fullback's going to sail through there. And I go, man, that's when tough. It was tough. I promise you one thing: you didn't see guys playing in Bermuda shorts when you played in those days, like you do today. You see all of them with their legs over their knees. I call it the Bermuda short look. They weren't wearing Bermuda shorts in those days.
So, you coached against a number of Big 8 legends in players, but also coaches. Who were some of your favorite coaches to coach against?
Well, Tom wasn't one of them. I'll tell you that because I love Tom Osborne, but I just didn't want to have to play that team. I didn't care, when it was competition. So I would rather say I had some good friends in coaching rather than competing against them. John Majors was one of my very favorite people. Glenn was you just had so many good guys. Jones down at Okie State was a really good friend. Mason was a good friend. Bill McCartney I really liked. And so I really got along and loved the guys in the league when I was there. Same thing out here when I was at Washington State. You just get to know the guys. You know what you're doing. You know you're competing. And yet you have great respect for them. And you don't let the world know that you're supposed to not like Hayden Fry. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
You're not supposed to let anybody know you love Don James. So you go play golf with them or you go have a drink or go to dinner with them and your wives, but you don't let your fans know it because they wouldn't like that. But that happened to be 2 of my fun guys too. I love Tom, Tom Osborne in a sense, but I always said I just didn't want to play his team.
Speaking of coaches, what was your? I guess the best way to answer it is what are your memories of coaching against Hayden, and outside of football? How did you feel about Hayden Fry?
I'd say it again, Keith. I didn't hear. Chris, I didn't hear.
That's okay. Hayden Fry. Just give me your thoughts about Coach Fry at Iowa.
Well, in first place, he did a tremendous job there. He brought a unique style to Iowa. it was a proven style. I can remember teasing him about his stand-up tight ends, which seemed to bother everybody but him. And of course, we would argue about how does a stand-up tight end block a 5 technique tackle when it's like, do you dive at him? Because we always say you got to put your hand on the ground like a 3-point stance to hit helmet to helmet.
Right.
But so we would argue about that, but he brought that style and it worked. He was a little ahead of his time. So now you see a lot of tight ends the ones that you see in the NFL in the slot standing up. And so I just thought he did a marvelous job of circling the wagons with the Hawkeye fans. He seemed to have a unique way to rally the people. He had a good line of bull, and believe me, he did, because he knew how to sling it. He had that Texas bull, and so I just think he was just marvelous, and he had great coaches, guys. When you look at his staff,
oh man,
oh my goodness! I mean, you look at some of the guys, the young ones and the old ones. That was one of his deal. He knew how to bring a young coach along, and he knew how to hire a really good one. And if I could say one thing and give him great credit, I'd say he made a marvelous job of keeping a great staff together.
Yeah, that coaching tree from the Stoops brothers to McCarney to Snyder to Pelini to just about everybody. Alvarez, absolutely.
And Ferentz.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ferentz and boy, if there's
well, I'll tell you a funny story. Barry Alvarez and we won the Lincoln City, Nebraska doubles handball championship one year together. When Barry was graduating and he was a grad assistant the year I came to Nebraska. So we were playing racquetball at noon nearly every day. So we entered the Lincoln, the local city championship, and damn if we didn't win it.
So the other coach I want to ask you about, with ties obviously at the bowl game with Washington State and Iowa State when they played, and I know that you didn't pick a side during that game, but did you ever have a chance to connect with Coach Leach, and do you have a story about Coach Mike Leach?
I didn't, and that's my fault. He was very receptive. I only went down one time to visit with him, and I didn't visit with him, and I think that's a reflection to me. I should have made the effort, but by that time I'm living in Coeur d'Alene when he came to Washington State. It's an hour and 50-minute drive for me to get down there. I don't know. One thing leads to another. You get set in your ways. And then you start thinking, no, I don't need to be doing that. He doesn't have time for an old coach just to come down there and shoot the bull. Well, everything I hear later tells me that's what he loved. I mean, one thing Coach Leach liked to do was shoot the bull and talk about anything. But, of course, he didn't like to talk about football, but would have been loved to have done it. So I think that's my fault. And then he goes to Mississippi State, which the irony of Mississippi State is, guys, that I was born and raised in a little town called Aberdeen, Mississippi. Aberdeen, Mississippi is about no more than 30 minutes from Starkville. And Starkville, of course, is at Mississippi State. And so I thought it was kind of irony. I would have loved to then, if I had known he was going to go to Starkville, I almost would have flown down there just to visit with him. About 1 minute you're at Washington State, a school I love, and the next minute you're at Mississippi State, which is my greatest love because I grew up a Bulldog fan. And I'm sorry I missed that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly seems like it seemed like a guy that was kind of cut from the same cloth. Storyteller, not afraid to cut a joke, have a lot of fun for sure.
And he wasn't also afraid to have a beer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, yes.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, we're gonna take a quick break here. We're gonna grab a word from our sponsor, Revelton Distilling Company. But when I get back, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about a different coach that you had a great relationship with, in Johnny Orr. So I want to talk a little bit about that after we get a word from Revelton Distilling Company.
At Revelton Distilling Company, everyone has become a part of the Revelton family. From the Taylors and their daughter who helped perfect their award-winning gins, to the team who installed Lucy, our 33-foot-tall custom-made still, right down to the local farms that provide our coveted corn, and even the cows on those farms who consume our mash byproduct. Want to see the farm to flask come to life? Now you can tour Lucy and find out where we take Iowa's harvest and transform it into our finest spirits. Choose between a 45-minute tour or find out even more by scheduling a VIP behind-the-scenes tour to get the taste of the full Revelton experience. You can visit them at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa, or find all of Revelton's award-winning spirits at any local grocery or spirits retailer.
And we are back. Again, we want to thank Revelton Distilling Company. Please go ahead and check them out. Chris, do you want to tease what we might be having coming up here with Revelton?
Yep. So we are tentatively scheduling a live recording of all of our podcasts. We're going to do a kind of a hodgepodge of all of our podcasts December 9th at noon at Revelton Distilling Company. So watch our social media. We're going to post some things about that, and we would love to invite everybody out. So.
Yeah, so please go and check us out. Once again, that's 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa. Come on out. Coach, right before that break, I asked you, kind of teased there, I wanted to talk a little bit about Coach Orr. Obviously, you guys were two characters at Iowa State at the exact same time. And I think, certainly for folks like Chris and I, part of what brought the fans in so much were the two of you. What was that like that time at Iowa State with it? I mean, not that you weren't a personality, but boy, it's kind of hard to out personality Johnny Orr.
You don't even want to go there, man. And so I'll back up what you're saying by saying this. When I got to Iowa State, Johnny Orr was already there, and he was already Johnny Orr. Okay.
Yep.
So now we're going to go out this summer. The first summer I'm there, I came in January. So now it's time to go do the Cyclone outings. Oh my goodness. 25 of them at least. And I tell Max Urick, I said, Max, I'm not speaking after him. And he's like, well, football, the routine is maybe the department, some assistant AD will chat, maybe one of the women's sports will talk, and then the men's basketball and me. I says, no, we can change in that. I said, if you think I'm following Johnny Orr, you're crazy. I said, maybe if I earn my keep, maybe 5 years from now, maybe, but not now. So we changed that around. I got up, did my 2 bits worth, and they listened politely, and then they waited on Johnny. And really, truly, you never knew what was coming out of his mouth. And I have even cringed at times when I'm like, whoa, man, did he just say what I think he said? But he was an absolute joy to be around, to be a part of, to be in the same department with. His heart was wonderful. He had just a couple of really unbelievably good, consistent coaches that were very much like my guys, personable and enjoyed each other. And so it just blended. And I give you a funny story. We're coming back from an outing up at Fort Dodge one night, and I had a big van, and it was like a 10-person van. And so we're all full. We got assistant ADs. We got Jimmy, the wrestling coach, Jimmy, tell me what his name is. Wrestling coach at Iowa State, Jim. Anyway, and he's the head coach, and he's there. I'll get it in a minute. I'm getting too old, but I shouldn't. But I forget when I need something right quick. I can't remember. But as I get around, so we got the wrestling coach, the basketball coach, me, 2 assistant ADs, and I don't know who else. So I'm rolling along pretty good there, coming back from Fort Dodge down the highway, and all of a sudden the blue light flashes. Well, I look down, and sure enough, I'm doing about 75 and a 65. And so I pull over, and the highway patrolman comes up to the window. I roll it down. And just about the time he gets ready to say something, Orr evidently recognized him, and I don't know this. And Orr says in that raspy voice, damn, coach, I'm glad you caught him. I thought we were going to get killed. So I'm like, are you crazy? But he just told the athletic director, but I've been afraid since we left Fort Dodge. And I'm like, Orr, are you crazy? Well, then it come to find out, guys, the highway patrolman was the guy that always led the team in, the buses that come around. And
Sure.
Orr, he had a lot to do with Johnny Orr. They knew each other really well. So he knew he was playing a joke, but I didn't. So I'm thinking he's going to get me about $1,000 fine for that. But that was Johnny Orr. He just had a great personality. And by the way, I have a sadness. I was just about to tell you, Bobby Knight passed away, and they were really close. A lot of people don't know that. Bobby Knight really loved Johnny Orr. I mean, I remember him. He came to a roast, a Johnny Orr roast, and I had a long visit with Bobby Knight and just asked him a few things about his years, and he was very open with me. And one of his final statements was, "One of my greatest friends in this business, who I've enjoyed and respect as much as anybody I know, was Johnny Orr." So, rest in peace, Bobby Knight. And now he and Orr can do some talking.
I'm sure talking is what they're going to do, and it's going to be pretty blue. By the way, Coach
Gibbons is
Jim Gibbons. Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing.
Jimmy Gibbons. Yep. I'm sorry. Yep. Tell Jimmy I apologize. I just couldn't.
He was All-American in Iowa State before that, wasn't he?
Yeah, and won a national championship.
Assistant under Coach Nick too, right? Harold Nichols. Yeah.
Well, he played under Nichols, but Jimmy won his own national championship as coach. So
absolutely.
We had some good fun years.
Yeah, absolutely. Great coach. Fun to see. By the way, Coach, that is the second Johnny Orr impression we've had on the podcast. John Walters.
That's right.
John's not that good.
John Walters. I don't know. I think you gave John Walters a run for the money on that one. I thought that was pretty good. It definitely did kind of remind me of boy. I never knew if that was Coach Orr's speaking voice, or just because he was tired of yelling.
No, it was him. If you were walking down the hall, you heard him yelling. All I ever heard was Wally.
He was never short of words, never short of volume by any means.
I can't imagine that the great poster that you guys reenacted of the Bartles and James wine coolers.
Yeah, we have to talk about Bartles and James.
I gotta ask, surely Coach Orr was probably not thrilled with having to do that, was he?
No, he liked it because we told him, the guys that promoted that in the building said it was only a picture. We weren't trying to do that I talk, you don't talk thing.
Sure, right.
Yeah. It was just that both of us had to play a role. And when we put our garb on, I looked more like the tall dude. And he looked more like the other guy. It didn't matter because we were going to play that role. But no, there was never a moment when Johnny Orr felt like he wasn't going to be able to say anything. Trust me. And so it was probably, I would say, if you took a national poll of some of the greatest promotions ever done in college football or in athletic departments in general, I'd have to tell you that the Bartles and James thing at Iowa State over those years was probably one of the greatest promotions to promote athletics using their people. It'd have to go down to one of the top 2 or 3 best ever.
It literally was just brilliant. I think some of our younger listeners may not be familiar with that ad campaign at the time. But it was so spot on. I mean, you say, Coach, that, you happen to look like, and Johnny happened to look like, but you guys really did fit exactly, the look and the feel and the mold of that campaign. It worked out just so brilliantly.
And I would do anything to have that poster.
Well, I know one thing. We signed an awful lot of them. There was a ton of, you go to those, after those things, every year the 4 of them came out. I don't know if they did them in a 4-year period, but all I remember, it seemed like every year when you go to an outing, you'd have to sit down at a table, and while everybody else was having some drinks and having a good time, you had to sit. We'd still drink a little, but have our couple of beers, but you're sitting there signing Go Cougs, or Go Cyclones in that case. And so it was quite a promotion, but more than I signed a lot of those posters.
So
You did.
when you were doing that, what did your players think about that campaign?
Well, I think they just thought it was what it was. You know, it was just two guys that they knew we were just trying to promote athletics, and I'm sure behind the scenes they thought we were a little goofy, but I never gave it much thought that they felt like it was beneath us or underneath us, and if they did, they weren't going to bring it up to me probably. But I think they all took it in the vein of which it was.
Yeah, I mean, I think for speaking for Chris and I as Iowa State fans, I think it was just a lot of fun because it was not just something that was kind of cute for the state of Iowa, but it was actually an opportunity to get some national eyes on Iowa State too. Certainly at the time, while being a Big 8 program, you weren't necessarily getting a lot of the national love, and that certainly brought a little bit more prominence to the program as well.
Well, and then we did one like Gamblers or something, and they promoted that. We're sitting on horses and all that, and that was, I think, the last one where we did kind of a Jim and John Gambler. I think we sang some songs, and Lord help us.
I remember that one.
I don't remember the songs going to the number one spot.
Chris, we'll have to. Do you remember that ad? We'll have to.
I've got it right here. Actually,
okay.
I'm pulling it up right now.
Oh my goodness.
Perfect. That's right. Google is a wonderful thing, Coach. I'm just going to tell you.
No, it's not. It's not either. There's some things I wish.
This is great. That's you can bet a good.
I have
time.
grandkids now. And I don't want them hearing some of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I got to ask you. One of the most famous players here at Iowa State, and when we talk about great players like Brees Hall and David Montgomery, the guy that Blaze Bryant. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Troy Davis, and not a lot of people probably realize you're the reason he came to Iowa State.
Well, he is. I had Arnie Romero was a defensive coach, and then I moved him over the tight ends, but he was the Miami contact, and he knew he had coached in Miami high school for so many years. Arnie and I coached together at the University of Miami, but his big deal was he was a full-fledged fireman. And so how did he get away with coaching? Because he would be 24 on and 24 off. And then during the season, he would bank his hours with other firemen. So he could get off 4 days in a row before he'd have to take a turn. And that's how he did it. And so when he came to Iowa State, he had retired. But when he told me there was a great little running back down in the south part of the city. And, and then so we all looked it up, and my goodness, here's a guy, the little kid that's rushing for 1 million yards, and I'm like, we got no chance to get that guy. But one thing led to another, and by golly, he brought him out. We had to be very careful with him, and I remember one of the media guys at the Des Moines Register got really upset with us because we didn't allow him to be in the on media day. We kept him out because he'd get really flustered and stutter. Mm-hmm. And a lot of folks didn't know that. And there was no way we were going to allow him because when we signed him, it was the big news, Mm-hmm. You're getting Davis, man, Tony Davis, yeah. Well, I knew that everybody, TV-wise, everybody was going to just fluster to get him. And I said, well, we can't do that. His whole image will be that he's dumb, not that, because he could get to where he couldn't speak. And we just did not want to do that. So I caught a lot of flack, if you'll know the truth, from the media for not having him be there on media day his first year. Then we left after that, and I left a note to Dan McCarney about, be careful. Tony's got to be protected a little bit. And, of course, that next year – And the other remarkable thing was he was so homesick, guys, that he didn't practice 2 days. He was going home every day. Mm-hmm. His folks wouldn't let him go home. They told him they wouldn't pay for it. So they sent his parents, not because they didn't want to do it, because they knew it would be prejudice. They sent his parents sent, it was his mother's brother and wife flew out to Ames, Iowa, and spent about 10 days. They came to the meetings, they went to practice, they saw everything that was going on. And by that time, we're getting ready about the first ball game. And we've been in school now probably 2 weeks. And he hadn't been to a class because all he could do was just want to go home. He was just that sick. He was out of his element, he felt. So anyway, his uncle and aunt came into my office and sat down and said, we could not be happier with what's going on here, and we are not going to recommend that to Tony that he go home. And we're going to tell him that he needs to come in here, sit down with you, find out what he's got to do to get this thing back in order and get his butt in gear. And so we did everything humanly possible academically, because by the time this was over, he'd been 3 weeks. And man, you missed 3 weeks of school as an athlete. You got some scurrying to do.
I mean,
so
Coach,
he only played limited amount of time for us because we'd have him in. I think he missed. He went to more study halls than he did practices for us. But I knew he was quality because we played him at Colorado, one of the last games of the season. Holy cow, he rushed for 100 yards and it wasn't even hard. I mean, it was like, are you kidding me? Well, where's this guy been all my life?
I remember being upset, Coach, that I saw that and I thought, why didn't we play him all year?
Yeah, I said the same thing. I said the same thing to the running back coach. What the hell's going on with you? But he just had missed so much time, we just couldn't. And it wasn't fair to the rest of the players to have him show up twice, 2 days a week and then play. So we had to juggle all that, but it turned out beautifully.
Well, Chris hadn't been to class for 3 weeks either.
Right.
So.
Troy and I, yet another thing Troy Davis and I had in common. We didn't go to class.
Yeah.
It worked out a little better for him.
Well, and Dan used him wonderfully, and then got his younger brother too. So that was a good deal for him.
Yeah. Darren did great as well.
Darren.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd say, Coach, we don't want to take up too much more of your time. We do have a special question that we ask all of our guests.
Okay.
That is brought to us by our friend Kyle Lehman at Wintrust Mortgage. Chris, do you want to go ahead and set up this question?
Yep. So I'm actually going to switch it up because this is a question that I've been wanting to ask Coach. And I'll ask you the question, Coach. I'll play the commercial, and that'll give you time to think about it. After you were done coaching, you hooked up on a little show with Jim Zabel. So yeah. I would love to hear about your relationship with Jim Zabel, and just think of one really great story about Zabel. And when we come back from this break, you can give us your answer. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Are you in the market for a new house and unsure of the mortgage process? Want to know that you have someone looking out for you? Kyle Lehman from Wintrust Mortgage is a down-to-earth, knowledgeable lender who can be there for you in your corner. He can work with you in any of the 50 states and is just what you need to expand your home search. Kyle will work with you through the entire process with little to no work from you. Take the worry of the mortgage process out of the equation so that you can focus on looking for your dream home. Contact Kyle at www.wintrust.com/Kyle-Lehman or call him at 515-473-0546.
All right, and we're back. So before the little break there from Kyle, thank you very much, Coach. Your best Jim Zabel story.
Well, you will appreciate it much because you're Cyclones. When I first got on there, Jim knows everybody. He's been there 53 years as the voice of. I'm just a coach that just got fired, and I'm just hanging around Ames trying to not make anybody mad and just enjoying life as we did. And so now I'm doing this radio show with him. So about the first 3 Sundays, we tried to always have a Cyclone guest or maybe someone that was pertinent to a Cyclone game, as you'll remember, and a Hawkeye game. Well, it became real obvious to me when we would have a play-by-play person from Kansas on talking about the Kansas-Iowa State game. we would ask, I would be shooting the bull with him. Jimmy would ask a question, and then without any warning, he'd say, "Oh, we really appreciate it, Coach." And I've got, wait a minute, we still got 6 minutes. Then when you flip it over the other way, so now we got a coach on from Michigan State, and they're getting ready to play Iowa. And it's question after question. and at the end, it's like, oh, well, it looks like our time's run out. Well, I guess I've got time for one more. And so about the third or fourth week after that happened, after the show was over, I said, Zaba, we're going to have an understanding here pretty quick. And he said, what's that? I love the guy, and he was a fun guy, and I got my point across. I said, if you think I'm going to share a microphone with you for the next however many years and have you spend 3 minutes with Cyclone people and 20 with Hawks, you're crazy as hell. And so he got that funny look, and I says, we're going to set a time, and when we have this guest on, he's going to be here for 12 minutes. And when we have that guy from Wisconsin, he's going to be here for 12 minutes. And I says, do we understand one another? And he said, yeah, I appreciate that. He says, Coach, I can see I just kind of get carried away. I said, yeah, you get carried away, but I'm going to make I carry you back. And so we really didn't have a problem after that. And gosh, we did it for 17 years. So we worked it out. But Jim did not make any bit difference about when he could. It didn't bother him to leave a Cyclone announcer to go come on.
It's funny. Like, you talk about coaches from different schools. Yeah, you look at look at Iowa. Mm-hmm. The past how many years? It's been 2 coaches since what, 1981 or whatever. Like
Yeah, and I tell you something. You hit a bad nerve with me. I know we haven't got much more time, but
let's hear it, Coach. I love it.
Let me tell you something. When you got a football coach that's won 192 games in 20 something years, and he's only lost 117, you don't tell him you don't. As an assistant AD does not fire his son or his offensive coordinator. You want to tell me that you think you know what he's doing? You have no idea whether Kurt Ferentz believes in defense, whether he makes every decision based on what he thinks is best for the team through defense, and all of a sudden you're going to fire his offensive coordinator. Oh, it just happened to be his son because he didn't score 25 points this year. Right now, they're 6-2, and everybody in the world knows they ought to be 7-1 because that stupid punt return thing the other day, that bad call. So here you got a coach that's 7-1. His offensive coordinator is his son. You're 7-1, and there's a great chance he's probably not going to lose another game. So you want to tell me an assistant AD is going to fire Kirk Ferentz's son, who's an offensive coordinator, because they're not winning because he didn't score 25 points a game? Shut up. I mean, it's off the charts to me of just either if the fans put up with that, they ought to have their butts kicked. And I have more respect for Hawkeye fans than that. And for me to see that, and I don't know how Kirk does, but I don't know how he does it. But I know how Jim Walden would have done it. They could have shoved that some places. But I just think, and you get back to the two. I mean, just think about those 2 coaches that they've had over there. My goodness, they've probably between the 2 of them won 300 games between the 2 of them. That's off the charts at a school in a state that does not have thousands of athletes every year.
I mean, literally, Iowa set the record for consecutive seasons without a winning season before Hayden got there. And to only have 2 coaches in that period of time is unheard of. I can't think of another single program in the entire country that has had 2 coaches in the last 40 years. Like, it's just
no. Well, the 2 closest would be Bob Devaney and Tom Osborne, as far as probably locals. As far as that, I don't know. You'd have to get into the Michigan thing between Bo and what's his name. But But all I know is that they don't take a back seat between the 2 coaches been in Iowa for, my goodness, for what, 40 years?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Bob Devaney and Tom Osborne. That's been forever. Like you don't have that anymore at all.
No.
They don't. Coaches have a lot shorter leash.
Well, you certainly, when you've had one there that's won 192 football games, and he's only lost 117. That's about 75 games, best I remember, to the good. 75 games over 500. And you're telling him who his offensive coordinator is and who his offensive line coach is? Oh, and it just happened to be his son. Now, when did that happen? When did we start allowing that to happen? So it's just, to me, one of the blights on college football of today. And I'm sorry. I love my Hawkeye friends that I have. I don't like all their fans that much, but I do like some of my Hawkeye friends. But to me, for them to tolerate that is awful.
I was going to say, this has been another installment of where we actually defend the Hawkeyes on this podcast.
I know.
Just breaks your heart, doesn't
We
it?
once had a conversation about PJ Fleck, and you've seen Tim. He almost put on an Iowa shirt. He hates PJ Fleck so much.
I have a lot of issues with PJ Fleck up here in Minnesota. I'm up here in Minnesota, coach, and
That's all right.
I've got my issues with that gentleman.
With Mr. Fleck. Well, he gets dressed nice for games.
And what he does
He's one of the few coaches left that doesn't wear a T-shirt. So I give him that.
That is true. He dresses very nice, and then he puts his own brand all over his uniform and says it's all about team and not individuals.
Good. You don't get a boat rower every day.
Well, nothing screams boat like gopher. But no, I think that's funny.
We didn't even have to have an STFU moment, and we just had one by Coach Walden. So
that was perfect. I thought that was great. That made me ridiculously happy. As much as it pains me, I'm not going to say as much to call Hawkeye fans my friends, but I will say I do appreciate that they've got their eye end on a few different things. So. That is definitely some insight that we appreciate having. Coaching is it's a different game than it was in late 80s, early 90s. It's just a completely different game.
Yeah, in some ways it's not. It's still player and coach relationships. The amount of people in the building anymore is totally different, guys. I mean. Mm-hmm. You've got staffs that are so large now with electronics and all the stuff that they're going and recruiting. I understand that. I don't think I would have liked it. I kind of liked having 8 or 9 guys in a room, pulling hard together without having so much other distractions and things. The NIL is driving most coaches I know crazy. They won't admit it, but it is. How to handle that. The portal thing has got to get under control. How many times can you jump from jump to jump? So there's a lot of things out there right now, guys, that's hurting and creating real problems with college athletics. And I don't even want to get into what just happened to the Pac-12 conference, because that's deplorable. And what it's going to cause and where we're headed from that. But it's
look how strong.
We'll see.
Look how strong that conference is with the teams, and with Washington, how good they are, in Oregon and USC. Even the 2 teams that don't have a home right now, Washington State and Oregon State, were ranked at one point this year. It is a travesty. And the Big 12 came out with their conference realignment schedule the next few years. And in 2027, for the first time in almost 125 years, Iowa State and Kansas State will not play.
Well, now you see what's happened out here. We'll never play ever again. At least there's a chance Kansas State and Iowa State will resume 2 years from now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're looking at Washington State and Stanford, they play this week. That's done. And when you look at the Pac-12 conference, take the 2 in the Bay. Every time someone at the 4 teams on each at the tops, we call it, when they play either one of those, that's the last time, maybe forever. Every time somebody in those same areas plays Washington State and Oregon State, it's forever. So all those 100-year games in one league, the tragedy of college football to me is traditions have been the background of everything that's ever been sacred about college athletics. And we are getting farther and further away, just like the Oklahoma-Nebraska. I still say, who's Nebraska play now compared to when the old Oklahoma game? Never. They've never overcome.
Right.
the
And
the
so,
Nebraska Oklahoma game, the Nebraska Colorado game, even
exactly,
losing that one, and then you had
exactly.
this whole Nebraska Iowa contrived rivalry.
Yeah.
Neither Iowa fans or Nebraska fans really give a crap about that game. They call it the Heroes Trophy, or whatever. They've got like a astronaut hugging a firefighter or something. I have no idea what the hell that is. It's like it's the most contrived, silly rivalry. No one cares, and
No.
so you've lost all of that. But here's what I say: like in this land of mega conferences, I say we just go to one big mega conference, and then we have all of these divisions, and each division is like 8 teams, and you play each of the teams within your division, and it essentially just goes right back to conferences. Like that's
Yeah.
what I'd like to see.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
they were that close. They only needed 2 more schools out of this conference to throw them into 4.
Right.
yep.
And
Yeah.
then say, okay, let's do a 4-man, let's do like a 4-man rotation and build it from there. And then you got 4 conferences. You got them scattered out. So you took the same number of schools, put them in 4 instead of 5. Now let's go to the national championship and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I really the thing I loved about the Big Eight so much, right? You played everyone once in football, everyone twice in basketball. You got everyone in. You didn't have any of this. We don't really know who's the real champion because they haven't really played. I mean, like the Big Ten, like the whole Big Ten West, and how weak that side of or whatever they're calling it now. Like how weak that is in that schedule where you get to play Purdue and Illinois and Indiana every year, and Minnesota can lose to your mom and still somehow become a division champion. Like I don't like all of that type of thing. Particularly when there's not parity between the two. If you're going to put Michigan and Ohio State on one side and Illinois and Purdue on the other side, there's not parity in that conference. Let's just be honest about that.
Something wrong with that picture.
Yeah, exactly. But I do I miss the idea. I mean, I don't miss the slog the old Big Eight was back in the day, but I do kind of miss some of that. And so it would be fun if we go to these mega conferences to kind of get back to.
Well, before I go, I know you're getting ready to get off, and I'm getting hungry. But the same thing that nobody's realized is that as the Pac-12 has gone away, and we're talking about 100-year traditions, keep in mind Texas and Oklahoma leave it. And so think about how many games you've played and you've seen. You were talking about the Big Eight, Tim. Just think about how many games has been played between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, Kansas, and I warned them as they jump into the SEC. The last 2 teams to do that was Texas A&M, mighty Texas A&M, and Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if anybody's heard from them since.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when Texas A&M was in the Big 8 or the Big 12, I should say,
Yep.
they were a big factor.
Yeah.
And it's not that so much as when those 2 teams leave the Big 12, they leave the remnants of the old Big 8 not to be played again. So there's all that going on. No more Texas Tech, Oklahoma. No more Texas Tech, Texas. And so it's just a shame that you're seeing all this get flushed down the drain for about $5 million more per year.
Yep. 100%.
Anyway, it's been fun.
Well, Chris, I'll go ahead and let you wrap this one up then.
Yeah, Coach, I just again can't tell you how much I appreciate you answering my phone call and you allowing me to text you and bring you on. Like I told you before, this was a bucket list thing for me. I've always looked up to you. I've always thought you were an honorable guy and a hell of a football coach. And I'll just say it. I think you got a raw deal when you got there, and I would have loved to have seen what you could have had with the facilities and things that we have now. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you so much for letting me talk to you tonight.
Well, that's my pleasure. When you get my age, it's happy that anybody still remembers who you are. So I
we
thank
call
you
it old
both.
man strength for a reason.
Well, maybe we'll do it again sometime, but I do appreciate it, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I would
Coach.
love
Yeah, Coach. I want to echo what Chris said. I told I'm an Iowa State fan. I grew up a half hour from Iowa City, but I'm an Iowa State fan because my folks went to Iowa State, and so, my dad got to experience all of the Johnny Majors, Earl Bruce era, and brought me along for the ride. So he was very excited to hear that I was going to get a chance to talk to you tonight. And like I said, to me, it's what defines Iowa State football for me. Really, it's the foundation that was there. So, very grateful you took the time to chat with us. We would love to have you back on. I just wish that you had more hot takes and would have been a little bit more open.
All right, guys. Have a good evening. See you later.
Yeah.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you. Thanks, Coach.
You betcha.
Man,
Dude,
that was super great.
Dude.
So I
Dude.
just can't thank him enough, and I want to give a shout out to Keith Schrag for setting that up. Keith and I interact on Twitter, and I mentioned to him briefly. I said, "Man, I would love to," because he has talked about the terrible hand that he got from Coach Kreiner, and we're going to have Keith on in a couple weeks to kind of give us the inside story of that. But he, I jokingly said, I said, "Man, I would love to be able to interview Coach Walden." And Keith's like, "Well, I talk to him every week on the phone. Why don't I just call him?" And I was like, "Okay." So
boy, he is as lively and he is exactly everything I remember. It's amazing to see these years later how much he still cares and how passionate, obviously how passionate he is. I didn't realize we were going to get that moment. That was fantastic. But
I was not quite prepared for the Iowa Hawkeye defense going on. So that was awesome. So, God love it.
Oh no, I mentioned before we started that I was starstruck ahead of time. We've had a number of guests on this podcast over the years that I should be, rightfully in awe of, but that one, I mean, you talk about legends. For me anyway, right? Like some of my earliest memories, some of my most important memories. You talk about that win in Oklahoma. You talk about some of the amazing players that have come through, right? We talked to Blaze, and that was so much fun to talk to Blaze. But we don't talk to Blaze there is no Blaze without Jim. So
and I didn't even get a chance to talk to him about Pete Taylor because he was the voice of that era, and but there was so much that we could have talked to him about. That's what was amazing. And I was telling him a story before air. Somebody had reached out to me on Twitter, and I can't find the tweet right now, that said his one memory, his best memory of Coach Walden was him and his dad and a few other guys were sitting at a feed store in this random town in Iowa, and Jim had pulled in and got some coffee, and he sat down and talked to those guys for like an hour. And he said he was just like a regular guy coming in and sitting down and having a conversation with him. And he said he always remembered that. So, and how personal he was. So,
he didn't come in chopping gum and people ask how his day was. He said elite and then walk away.
Let it go, Tim.
No, seriously, that guy is about as personal as you can get. So, our huge thanks to Coach Walden. It'd be fun to get a chance to talk to him again. Folks, we all appreciate you coming on. Denny, Joel, Keith, the guys that hopped on. Brian, thank you very much for joining us on this live stream as well. Everyone else listening live or listening on the podcast, we very much appreciate it. We really hope you enjoy this conversation half as much as Chris and I did, because we're both giddy little schoolgirls right now.
That's right. Absolutely. I thought I hit the jackpot last week when I got to sit on the back end and just listen to Keith Sims tell stories, and then I got to actually talk to Coach Walden. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic.
It's been a cool week.
So yeah, absolutely. So Chris, I'll give you a chance here really quick to kind of talk about everything else we have going on at Three Beards Media. A couple changes, a couple new things coming on.
Man.
Give us a little download.
Yeah, so we got a slew of podcasts coming out. Stacy actually asked me, she's like, "How many you got this week?" Well, we got 4 episodes coming out this week, 5 next week. We're going to do an on location little podcast at Bill's brand new bar for fall starts. We're going to
Nice.
break in his bar next Tuesday. And then, of course, we're going to do our live event at Revelton. And then I want to give a shout out, 3 blind refs, Sam, Jim, and Ben. Their inaugural first episode last week has done some amazing numbers, and they killed it. And that's going to be a really fun pod to listen to with those guys. Hot Mess Happy Hour's got an episode coming out. And Dave Larson, the new host of Side of the Storm, has done a wonderful job. So, and then Hawk's Eye View and Ball Don't Lie. We're just killing it with the content creators we have here. We couldn't do it without those guys, and then our amazing sponsors. So, it's been a wonderful ride. I'm super excited with where we're going to go, and 2024 is going to be even better.
Yeah, we're very excited for everything that we have. Listeners, thank you very much for making Three Beards Media what it is. With that, I will say thank you very much for listening to Old Man Strength, in case you passed out there and forgot what you were listening to there for a second. A podcast of Three Beards Media, brought to you by Revelton Distilling Company and Wintrust Mortgage. Once again, I am Tim Johnson with Chris Shipley, and we will see you guys next time.